You know how some brands just seem to appear out of thin air? Like one minute you've never heard of them, and the next they are absolutely everywhere. That is the Hawkers story in a nutshell. And today, we're going to crack open the playbook that took them from a tiny, tiny startup to a global sunglasses empire. All right, so where does a story like this even begin? It starts right here. $300. That's it. That was the total investment four friends in Spain scraped together back in 2013 to get this thing off the ground. I mean, think about that. It's barely enough to start, well, anything, let alone a global brand. And then you fast forward a few years and you get this. Over $100 million in annual sales. They've sold sunglasses in more than 50 countries. The jump from $300 to $100 million, it's just staggering. And it makes you wonder. Yeah, how on earth did they pull that off? I mean, the sunglasses industry is notoriously tough. It's dominated by these legacy giants that have been around forever. So in this explainer, we're going to break down the exact strategies Hawkers used to go from a long shot to a major player. So to really appreciate just how far they've come, we've got to rewind. Let's go all the way back to the very beginning. Because the origin story here is, well, it's pretty unbelievable. So picture it, 2013, Spain. Four buddies have a simple but brilliant idea. Sell cool, stylish sunglasses for just $20 to $40. I mean, that completely undercut the big guys. And the idea just took off like a rocket. But it took off almost too fast. Suddenly, they were drowning in orders they couldn't fill and customer service emails they couldn't answer. It was one of those classic, we're too successful problems. They knew they had a hit, but they were barely keeping their heads above water. That early success created a huge problem. How do you scale when you're already overwhelmed? And that brings us to the first really clever part of their playbook, a super aggressive, low-cost marketing strategy that basically poured jet fuel on the fire. They went all in on this idea called growth hacking. Now, what is that? It's all about finding these really creative, kind of scrappy, and most importantly, cheap ways to get massive results without needing a massive marketing budget. It's about being smart, not just rich. And here's exactly how they did it. First, they jumped on Facebook ads back when they were dirt cheap. Get this, they were getting new customers for as little as €1 a pop. Insane. Second, they just gave away sunglasses, over 30,000 pairs, to influencers to create buzz. Third, they built this army of over 5,000 college kids to be their brand ambassadors on campus. And finally, they started teaming up with huge brands like the Lakers and Mercedes-Benz, which gave them instant street cred. And what was the result of all that hustle? This, a massive online community. We're talking 6.6 million followers on Facebook, 1.7 million on Instagram. They didn't just sell sunglasses, they built a genuine movement. But of course, all that growth just created even bigger problems. So the company basically hit a wall. Their growth hacking was pure genius, but their actual operations, shipping, service, the boring stuff, it just couldn't keep pace. They needed more than just buzz. They needed money, structure, and some serious leadership to get to that next level. And that is when this number changes everything. In 2016, Hawkers landed a €50 million investment. And this wasn't just cash to keep the lights on. This was the catalyst that would totally reshape the entire company. The investor who led the charge was Alejandro Betancourt. And this is key. He didn't just wire the money and walk away. Nope. He stepped in as the company president and later put in another €20 million, becoming the majority owner. He brought the capital, yeah, but he also brought the know-how they were desperate for. Now, to really get the picture here, it helps to look at his background. Betancourt's business portfolio is pretty diverse. He was a co-founder of Derwick Associates, an energy company in Venezuela, which sources have noted has been linked to corruption allegations the company itself denies. His main investment firm is O'Hara Administration. He's also been a huge shareholder in a Canadian oil and gas company called Pacific E&P and in Arado New Transport, which is a big ride-sharing competitor in Spain. So he brought this really wide range of experience to the table at Hawkers. So with fresh capital and new leadership, Hawkers was ready for its next big move. They had this crucial realization that the very social media platforms that built them up couldn't be the only thing they relied on forever, especially as that digital world got more and more crowded. And this quote just nails it. Their pivot into opening actual physical stores, it wasn't just some random idea. It was a survival tactic. Those Facebook ads that used to cost them €1, well, those days were long gone. The costs were skyrocketing, and they knew they couldn't be a one-trick pony anymore. And this chart just lays out the logic so perfectly. I mean, look at the difference. When you're digital only, you're basically a slave to rising ad costs and random algorithm changes. And, people can't actually try on your product, which is a pretty big deal for sunglasses. But by opening over 80 stores, they suddenly had brand showcases, they slashed their return rates, and they started getting all this amazing in-person customer data. It just makes the whole business stronger. But here's the wild part. Even after that huge push into retail, check this out. Online sales still make up a whopping 90% of their business. So what does that tell you? They didn't abandon what made them successful. They just built a safety net around it, creating a much more resilient company. All right, so they've got their marketing dialed in, they've got their retail strategy humming along, but there was one last massive piece of the puzzle left to solve, actually making the sunglasses. And taking control of their own manufacturing was a game changer. And you know what the final push was? The pandemic. Just like so many other companies, they had this terrifying realization of how fragile their whole business was, relying completely on factories overseas. When the world shut down, it basically forced their hand. They made the incredibly bold move to build their own factory right there in Spain. And the difference this made was just night and day. Their old way of doing things involved cheaper molds and literally just painting on the finishes. Now, they're using high-end Italian machinery with way better technology. It means they have total control over the quality, and they can even be more sustainable by recycling defective materials. It was a huge, huge investment, but it finally allowed them to compete on quality, not just on price. So after this incredible journey from a $300 bet to a global brand that makes its own stuff, what are the big lessons here? What exactly is the legacy of the Hawkers playbook? So when you boil it all down, what is the Hawkers playbook? Well, it's a few key moves. First, you master that scrappy growth hacking to get things off the ground. Then you find smart money and leadership to handle the growing pains. After that, you build a real-world presence so you're not just living and dying by the internet. And finally, you take control of your own production so you can own your quality. But maybe the biggest lesson of all, you have to be willing to constantly adapt to whatever the world throws at you. And that really leaves us with one final big question to chew on. The path Hawkers took from being a cool Instagram brand to a serious company with its own stores and factories, that's a really hard road to follow. So as the digital world just gets more and more competitive and expensive, you have to wonder, is this intensive, capital-heavy playbook the new blueprint for survival for the next generation of online brands? It's definitely something to think about.